One of my primary goals when teaching sociology is to teach it in a manner that gets students thinking empathetically, thinking about what other people experience in our society in relation to what they've experienced and how they can use that kind of thinking and knowledge to create areas of social change and to create areas of kindness and to reduce the level of judgment that we oftentimes subject each other to and to ourselves. And so the reason I'm telling you about this is because social inequalities, I believe, is the heart and soul of sociological learning. Taking the time to think about how society is not necessarily equal or fair and what the overall impact of that is. There are two different terms, sociological terms, that I focus on when teaching social inequalities. I oftentimes tell my students that these are the most important words I teach you all semester. I feel like I'm adding to those words, and I will discuss the other word. We've already discussed it a little bit already in this course. But the first one that I'm talking about is structure. And so structure, the other one is agency. I'll describe both of them, but structure is how societies take shape and are maintained, and it's our social institutions. Education is a social institution, the family is a social institution, the workforce and economy, the government, the medical institution. These were things I was talking about early on in our semester when we were discussing the kind of building blocks of what sociology is. And so that's what structure is, the social institutions. And these social institutions impact people. So structure means how society is acting on individuals, and then it's the factors that enable or constrain behavior. We have opportunities in our society, but sometimes we are either held back by social institutions and the opportunities that we have. Sometimes we have an inordinate amount of social opportunities. And so sometimes our behavior is enabled. We're allowed to do whatever we want. And sometimes it's constrained. And then finally, structure can be the burden of inequality, what people are grappling with in relation to structural inequalities and how social institutions have oppressive aspects of them, so they're ingrained in the systems that there's discriminatory and prejudicial treatment. The other word is agency, and so that's how individuals act in society. And it's our free will and our ability to achieve. So it's how hard we work, how much we try, how tenacious we are in looking for opportunities. And so another way of thinking about it is how we get from A to B. And when you think about A and B, we're talking about having a social goal, a societal goal, and achieving it. So A would be having that goal, and B would be achieving it. Examples of that would be even as a little kid, like having the goal of learning how to read. So, how do you get from A, wanting to learn how to read, to B, being able to read? High school. How do you get to be a high school graduate? Having the goal of being a high school graduate is A, achieving it is B. Owning, purchasing a home. How do you have that goal and then achieve it? B. And so ultimately, there are numerous ways, and agency is the one we choose. And then finally, it's our capacity to overcome social inequalities. We can try and try and try, and oftentimes people succeed, but not always. And we're going to talk about that. So I just mentioned from A to B, so you can see here it is. And so sometimes people take all of these different paths, right? So you have the blue path that kind of has that big loop in it. You have that green path that goes out past B and back around to it. You have the yellow path that goes around A. Let's take a look at the yellow path. In my particular circumstance, I flunked out of college the first time I attended when I was like appropriately college age. And so you could consider my flunking out of college that that yellow line and how it goes backwards, right? So that was a big backwards moment in my life where I made a huge mistake, but you can see that that line gets back on track and achieves B, right? So it achieves, if A was earning a college degree, when I reached B, I've earned it. And so that's my agency, and that is my ability to navigate structure. So remember that structure can enable or constrain behavior. that yellow line shows that structure enabled my behavior. It didn't stop me, it almost helped me in a way because I had opportunities based upon my socioeconomic status as a person who was raised middle class, as a person with college educated parents and things of that sort. And so I still had the opportunity. What structural inequalities look like is like this. They limit. And so look at where that yellow line is now. If I had been in a different situation as far as my opportunities, as my identity as a middle class person, my identity as having parents who were raised with college educations, like I wouldn't have gotten the chance to make a mistake and then get back on track. If I had made a mistake, that would be it. That would have been my chance. And quite honestly, maybe I wouldn't have even had a chance in the first place because maybe I wouldn't have had the support from parents helping me navigate a college system. Maybe I wouldn't have had the support of having a strong education that ultimately was able to even get me back on track when I had made a mistake. Maybe I wouldn't have had those opportunities. And so one of the images I use to try and really get you to understand what structure and agency is this one. And when I'm actually in class with students, I do something kind of weird. I oftentimes do something kind of weird in class because it gets everybody's attention and hopefully helps them remember concepts. And so the way I will teach structure and agency, and I'm going to help take you through it, I'm going to help you visualize it, is I ask everybody like around in the front row to zip up their bags. I tell them I'm not going to go through them at all because that would be really, really weird, right? But I'm going to use them to demonstrate structure and agency. And so I always have my own bag that I carry around campus. I sling it around like across me. It's a cross body bag. And so I have my bag, depending on if I'm going to my office, depending on what campus I am on, I might have my lunch bag, and I can get around campuses with this. Cal State campuses are big, there's lots of stairs and everything, but I can get around no problem with my bag. But what I end up doing is talking about structural inequalities and how they can weigh you down. And so I will go around and pick up my students' bags while I'm carrying my bag still. So I'll pick one student's bag up and I'll sling it on my shoulder and I'll say that that might be a language barrier. I'll pick up another student's bag and so now I'm holding 3 bags and say maybe that is a medical condition that I have. I'll pick up another student's bag and say maybe it's a learning disability that I have. I'll pick up another student's bag and say maybe that is my socioeconomic status and being from a working class family that is struggling economically. I'll pick up another bag and say that maybe I have had some issues with neurotypical behaviors. So maybe I have dealt with some, not having neurotypicalness means that you've dealt with mental illness in some capacity. And so at this point now I'm carrying, what did I say, 5, 6 bags maybe in addition to my own bag. I'm loaded down. And students, especially on like Cal State, so a lot of times they're carrying a lot of stuff around with them, their laptop, their books. So these bags are heavy. And so my shoulders are kind of burning and I'm holding them in my hands and I'm covered in bags. And so by students seeing me stand there holding all of this stuff, I try to show them that how hard now is it for me to navigate? Could I get up all the stairs that it takes to get to the classroom that we're in? Could I sit down in a chair? Can I move around? Can I even stand there that much longer as I carry all these bags? No. But here's how our society works. When you have all of those social inequalities, they're invisible, right? You don't see them. Nobody's carrying around these literally as bags. And so we don't take the time to think, oh my goodness, what have you been dealing with? What kind of weight have you been carrying? Here, let me try and help you. Let me carry one of those bags. Let me figure out a way that you don't have to carry one of those bags. We don't do that in our society. We have a society that says if you work really hard, you can achieve anything. And that's true. But the point in carrying all those bags and showing my students this and the idea of structure and agency, sure, you have free will. You can work harder and harder and harder and harder. But the fact is, when you are impacted by structural inequalities, you are weighed down and it is heavy and you get tired. And so We as a society, our cultural norms is that, you can achieve whatever you dream of. Well, yes, that is true, but it is so much harder. And we do not talk about how much harder it is for some people. We just act like, work harder. What's wrong with you? Keep going, keep trying. And if you can't achieve the societal goals that we have in our society, we don't look at the fact that it's because you're dealing with social inequalities. We'd look at the fact that you should just be a person that is smarter, better, tries more, all of these different things. We have this narrative in our society about working hard, so much so that individuals that are grappling with these social inequalities turn on themselves and say, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I get through high school? Why can't I get a college education? Why can't I own a home? What is wrong with me that I can't figure this out when other people do? What's wrong is that we have social inequalities, and what's wrong is that our society does not look at these in a way to say that inherently some people are born into a situation where they get more. They get more by virtue of who they are, the family they're in, the identities they have. And we don't want to look at that because that's uncomfortable. And so instead, we just kind of put the pressure on everyone and then say something's wrong with someone when they can't achieve something equal to someone else that was just given more by virtue of their life situation. So you have seen the definition of privilege as we've discussed it in relation to race and oppressions that people experience. But I want to show it to you again now that we've talked about structure and agency. And so you can see that it's the rights, the control, the access to services. This is getting from A to B however you want with support. This is like the image you've seen throughout this particular lecture in the upper right-hand corner of the person at the top, just running towards the finish line, unencumbered and ready to go as fast as they can possibly go, as opposed to being weighed down by societal inequalities. And so things I want you to keep in mind in relation to privilege as we discuss social inequalities is that you can be facing social inequalities in one area of your life, whether it's socioeconomics, maybe it's having a disability, maybe it's in relation to gendered inequalities, maybe it's in relation to sexuality or religion or race or age. But you might also then have privilege in other areas. So you can be both oppressed and the oppressor. So you can have multiple areas of your life that you have completely different scenarios and different rights, control, access to services, opportunities, products, and other forms of power. Exactly the words you're seeing in front of you. Other things that you want to keep in mind in relation to privilege is that oftentimes when you're accustomed to privilege, when society has moments of equality, those to individuals having privilege can feel like oppression, like you are all of a sudden being discriminated against because you don't have as many rights or control, because other people are also getting rights and control. And so ultimately, when we talk about structure and agency, when we talk about privilege, which are difficult things to talk about, especially if you're a person realizing that you do have a fair amount of social privileges and a fair amount of areas of your identity, you can stop and think about what a person is going through. When you see someone struggling in society, as opposed to making that seemingly instantaneous judgment about, well, if they only, maybe you could stop yourself and say, wait a second. Let me think about what is their experience in society like? What systemic oppressions are they facing? What structural inequalities do they experience? What are they being weighed down by, right? Think of me again carrying all of those bags. What are they carrying? And can I be kinder? Can I be more patient? Can I help them? And so ultimately, that's why I go back to society and sociology and an understanding of all these topics being so transformational in our lives, because it's an opportunity to say, wait a second, It's not just about our agency and the free will that we have. It's about how society impacts all of us and what can I do to try and make that better for someone.